Okay, thank you. Brian Jenks, NDSU Research Center in Minot, weed scientist. All right, let's talk herbicides label for flax. So let's talk first soil applied residuals. So Valor can be applied in the fall. It has a 3 to 4 month rotation restriction based on the rate that you apply and whether you're no-till or conventional. Obviously, with Valor, you're going to be targeting winter annuals as well as early emerging weeds like kochia and Russian thistle. Treflan is also labeled in the fall. Now, the Treflan Sonland labels are a little interesting. Uh, if you look right here, hopefully you can see it on your screen, but the flax label or Treflan label says flax is fall application only, whereas Sonland, we're applying it according to the label, looks like it's spring. But with a medium soil, which most of our soils are, we're looking at about 7.5 pounds. Now for Sonalan, if you look at the wording, it says apply and incorporate Sonalan 10G before planting. But then it says application may be made in the fall or in the spring prior to planting canola or cranberry. So it doesn't reference flax. It only references a fall application for canola and cranberry. So I interpret that as meaning you're applying this in the spring. And so again, for a medium soil, you're looking at 7.5 pounds for a 10G formulation or 2 pints if you're using the liquid. And then for heavier soils, up to 2.5 pints. Callisto is labeled as a for a pre-application for some soil residual. I will be covering the weeds that are controlled or suppressed by Callisto in a couple minutes. Then, of course, the product that most of people are using is going to be either Spartan or Spartan Charge, primarily for kochia, wild buckwheat, and other weeds. Okay, for Sonalan phytotoxicity, I got this information from Gowan, but this study was conducted in Carrington, so probably a good chance it was done by Mike Osley or Greg Andrus. But this just showed 2 and 2.5 pints of Sonalan. Looks like there's good crop safety there. Once you got up to 3 pints of Sonalan, we were starting to see some crop response. And there was no difference between treatments for yield and oil content. Okay, for our pre-plant or pre-emergence burn down, we have Roundup, AIM, Spartan Charge, Callisto. I put PC here because the label says partial control of kochia, and then of course gramoxone. So we know that a lot of our kochia is already Roundup resistant, so we've got to have something else in the tank. Historically, we've used quite a bit of AIM or probably more likely Spartan Charge, but we know that some areas now have the group 14 resistance. So we'll address that in a minute. So we can get some suppression from Callisto, a little bit of residual, but you may have to go with gramoxone. Gramoxone does provide excellent burn down of kochia and other weeds. We are conducting research on some new burn down products, but any potential labels are a few years away yet. Okay, so if you do have group 14 resistance or you're suspecting that you might, obviously if you're using Roundup and say a Spartan Charge, you want to go out to your field 7-10 days later and sample some kochia. What you're going to do is take 3 to 4 leaves, put it in an envelope, and then send it to the National Genotyping Center in Fargo. Now, one farmer can submit 4 different samples, so you can get 4 different envelopes, put 3 or 4 leaves in those envelopes, put them in a larger envelope like this, and send it to the National Agricultural Genotyping Center in Fargo. You'll want to go to the website for the Genotyping Center, which is just genotypingcenter.com. And once you go there, you'll find this weed sample submission form and fill that out and include that with your samples. Okay, for post-emergence herbicides label for flax, there's Not much new here. We don't really have any new products. I'm going to use the term bronate because that's what it was originally. There really is no bronate sold anymore. It's just there's a bunch of generics that have bromoxynil and MCPA. And with the bronate, you're targeting broadleaves, and it is good on kochia, but you got to get it when it's small. Curtail M is being phased out. The new product that will be available is Stinger HL. It's just a high load stinger. It is now a 5 pound per gallon product instead of a 3, and you'll have to tank mix your own MCP with it. Of course, Select and Assure 2 are readily available. We see more resistance with foxtail and wild oat with Assure 2, and so most of us are using Select. Post, just an FYI, there's not a lot of Post around, and we just got the message that BSF is phasing out Post, or they're getting out of the Post business. There may be some generics in the future that pick it up. So again, Stinger HL is will be the product that you will be using for any clopyralid products that you need. For specifically for Canada thistle is what we're usually targeting. So we do have a 24C label for flax in North Dakota. It'll be applied at 0.15 to 2 pints an acre. Again, mix your own MCP and make sure you apply it before bloom stage. With Spartan, you're well aware of Spartan and the need to match your rate with your soil characteristics. You need to know your pH, organic matter, and texture to be able to pick the right rate. And it's primarily used to control these weeds down here at the bottom. Okay, what if you do have group 14 resistant kochia? Now we know for sure that if you do, AIM and Sharpen are not going to control that kochia. Of course, Sharp is not labeled for flax, but AIM is. Now, with regard to Spartan, we're not seeing 100% resistance to Spartan, but we are seeing various levels of control. I've seen basically 20 to 80. So in some cases, it might look still pretty good out in the field following Spartan. But in other cases, you might see very little control. You might have to consider using Treflan, Sawland, Callisto to provide additional kochia suppression. You might consider something like Anthem Flex in the fall. I'll show you the rotation restriction there. And then, of course, applying Bronate early post-emergence on kochia that's less than 3 inches. So with Anthem Flex, the rotation restriction is 2 to 4 months, depending on the rate that you use. Now, the rate that you're likely to use in North Dakota falls in these 2 columns, so either 2 or 4 months. Here's some research that we conducted this past year with fall applied Anthem Flex. The treatments were applied October 16, and this evaluation was the end of June. Now remember, Anthem Flex is just a combination of Zidua and AIM. So this is Anthem Flex at 3, 4, 6 ounces, and then also a combination of 3.5 ounces tank mix with metribuzin. Now you're not going to put metribuzin in front of flax. This was a study done actually in front of wheat, but it shows you the weed control that we were able to achieve with 4 ounces, about 70% control of kochia and green foxtail. With 6 ounces, we were able to get 90% control. Now, I say this is an option, but it doesn't mean it's an inexpensive option. It's not cheap. So we are able to get some suppression from Anthem Flex. You'll have to decide if it fits your budget. Okay, where might Anthem Flex fit the best? Certainly to help us with Group 14 resistant kochia. If you've got Group 1 and Group 2 resistant foxtail or wild oat, it can certainly give you some suppression. It'll help you where you've got heavier weed densities. And then the fall application certainly helps where you don't expect to receive consistent activating May rains. Keep in mind that this fall application is suppression. It does not provide season-long weed control. You'll still need to apply something in the spring for season-long control. Okay, some weeds controlled or suppressed by Callisto. For residual control in the pre-emergence application, you can expect suppression on kochia, but it does claim control of lamb's quarters, prickly lettuce, red root pigweed, and some other weeds. If weeds are emerged, this is post to weeds, not post to the crop. Suppression of buckwheat, horseweed, kochia, control of lamb's quarter, pigweed, wild mustard, suppression on ragweed, control of sunflower. So it does control a few weeds, suppresses others. Okay, what are our most problematic weeds in flax? Probably kochia and pigweed, wild buckwheat, I think, are three of our biggest weeds. And we rely mostly on Spartan to control these weeds, especially kochia. Pigweed, we really don't have a product post-emergence that's really good. We rely on Bronate, but Bronate we know is weak on pigweed, so we really need that soil-applied herbicide to control pigweed. Bronate can get smaller buckwheat, but it can miss bigger buckwheat. For Canada thistle, that's where we need the clopyralid or the Curtail M or Stinger HL. And then green foxtail, of course, we need something like Select. So in order to make these effective, we got to have proper or ideal rainfall. That's out of your hands, but you got to have rainfall to get those soil applied herbicides activated. We need to spray small weeds, less than 3 inches. We might be able to reduce weed densities through fall applications. And then, of course, we don't have control of late weed flushes, but that can cause some problems for us in flax. Some other tough weeds controlled by Bronate or Curtail M: horseweed, marsh elder, ragweed, nightshades, sunflower, or Russian thistle. Of course, with Canada thistle, we're relying on Curtail M. With wild oat, we're relying on Select using a full rate, preferably when the wild oat is less than 3 leaf. Weeds controlled by Bronate, we're looking at small kochia, pigweed, mustards, lamb's quarters. Okay, so the question comes up sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to have kochia, Canada thistle, and grasses in the same field, and where you're growing flax, can you tank mix Bronate with Curtail M plus Select plus crop oil? And then what kind of flax injury can you expect? And will there be a reduced yield? I summarized a 3-year study that was conducted by Greg Andrus at Carrington back in the early 2000s. The treatments that he had was Bronate alone, Bronate plus Curtail M, and then Bronate plus Curtail M plus Select plus oil. He had 3 timings: early, mid, and late post, which was equivalent to about 2-inch flax, 5 to 7-inch, or 10 to 14-inch flax early flower. His results. He showed no statistical yield reduction between treatments or by timing. However, there was a slight numerical trend for lower yield with the later treatments. Now, that trend for lower yields with the late applications may be due to a couple of factors. May be due to, in part, injury near flowering, because there was some injury. But then also, when you're making a late application, you have that prolonged weed competition. Generally, there was more crop response when Curtail M and Select were added to the tank. He saw a range of 12 to 62% injury 7 days after treatment. This injury would be expressed in the form of probably chlorosis and slight stunting. Also interesting was there were 2 dates or 2 application dates where treatments were applied when the air temperature was in the 50s. And it also showed that on those 2 dates, that's where injury was highest. So there seemed to be more injury when they were making these applications in colder temperatures. So my recommendation would be avoid temperature extremes. Avoid temperatures in the 50s if you possibly can. And then also, of course, avoid temperatures that are above 85. Also avoid late applications if you can. Target about 4-inch flax and small weeds. In my experience, when we've made late applications to say 7, 8, 9-inch flax, that's when we start to see the crop laying over a little bit more. Regarding pre-harvest application, nothing different here. Glyphosate, if you're doing a pre-harvest glyphosate, that seed moisture needs to be 30% or less with PHI 7 days. But you can't use this flax if you've sprayed glyphosate. Can't use it for flax grown for seed. Same with Sharpen. Apply it when the bolls are 70 to 80% brown, PHI 7 days. And then Valor does not have this restriction for flax grown for seed, but the same target of 70 to 80% of the bolls are brown with a PHI of 5 days. We've had in the pipeline the hope that we can get diquat labeled. The IR4 work has been done. It's in EPA and it's been there for a while, and we're just waiting for this to be labeled, hopefully in the next year or two. Okay, I dusted this one off the shelf. How do we control volunteer flax? And back in 2003, this was a common question. How do you control volunteer canola or volunteer flax in dry pea? Now, not a lot of flax growers or pea growers are going to be using metribuzin, but if you're, or maybe if you're a pea grower, you use metribuzin. Certainly if you grow soybean, you should be using metribuzin. But we found back then that metribuzin is very good on volunteer canola, but to get volunteer flax, we need it at a little bit higher rate. And this 3/8 of a pound is probably a little bit high, certainly high for some soils. So you've got to be careful with your soil characteristics when applying metribuzin. And then applying metribuzin post, we were able to get quite good control of volunteer canola, but the metribuzin post was not near as effective on volunteer flax. Other herbicides, Spartan Pre only gave a suppression of canola and obviously no control of volunteer flax because it's labeled. Pursuit at 1 ounce. If Pursuit fits your crop rotation, that's where we got good control of volunteer canola and volunteer flax. And then this is Spartan plus Pursuit. Again, good control of volunteer canola and maybe suppression on volunteer flax. Raptor Basagran controlled the volunteer canola, but did not control the flax. And then same with Basagran by itself. So for controlling volunteer flax, metribuzin can help. Pursuit can help as well if it fits your crop rotation. In wheat, any styrene containing product will help control volunteer flax and will generally do a good job if the rate is high enough.